Hey, it's Grottu Orloff here, October 9th, 2020. This is the Grottu Orloff Show, Episode 2. And today we're brought to you by our sponsor, Aurora Model Kits out of Hempstead, New York. Now, for 1963, Aurora's new release, The Mummy, all plastic assembly kit, on sale at your local hobby store or Five and Dime. 2 nights ago, there was a debate between the current vice president, Race Bannon, and the vice presidential hope to be Kamala Harris. And some people, I know most of the networks or streaming channels on YouTube, when Race Bannon was talking, there's a shot of him talking, and you don't see Kamala Harris. And when she's talking, you don't see Pence. Well, I call him Race Bannon. Now, on if you were looking at the feed from C-SPAN, they had it split screen, so you could see Pence, you could see Harris, and when Pence was talking, she was just making the most smarmy, disgusting, patronizing. Yeah, tell me what you're gonna say. Just disgusting. You just wanted to. It was so aggravating. So I think people that actually thought Kamala Harris was okay, maybe they weren't seeing the split screen and all the fucked up faces she was making. It was really disgusting. And of course, she wouldn't answer about whether they'd pack the court and add more people to the Supreme Court if Biden's elected, in order to stack the court so it would always be in their favor. But anyway, no one paid attention to it because for 2 minutes on Pence's head, on his perfectly coiffed white Race Bannon hair, a fly landed and just kind of got stuck there in the hairspray that they put on your hair before a TV appearance. It just was there for 2 minutes, then flew away. And that's all anyone was talking about yesterday on Facebook and all these little Instagram type things. It's like The Fly. And I heard on the radio, they come back from a commercial and they're playing the song The Fly by Chubby Checker. That's probably the first time in 60 years that song's been played on AM radio here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. It's a great song. But, it's like, hey, flies land on people. Has a fly ever landed on you during a barbecue? I mean, it just happens. Yeah, so anyway, people thought, well, a fly landed on him. That means he's a piece of shit. This idiocracy kind of thinking. Anyway, that's the Fly dominated all the news yesterday. And, they talk about, and now Nancy Pelosi, the Speaker of the House, has said yesterday that today, probably right now, if I go downstairs and put on TV, she's going to try to get into the 25th Amendment, where they can remove a president if they're acting crazy or if they're incapacitated. So she's going to try to show that he's mentally incapacitated because he's on these medications and the steroid, because he had COVID. I shouldn't say that word. He had a V. Anyway, so they're going to try to get him out, but they can't do that with the vice president's authorization. But it's just theatrics to undermine the president. So that's in the news. Also, looks like it's actually next week they're filming the new Spider-Man movie, and apparently Doctor Strange is going to be in the Spider-Man movie. So the next Doctor Strange movie will be directed by Sam Raimi, and in that, I hear they're even going to get Hugh Jackman possibly back as Wolverine, because Doctor Strange is going to go into the multiverse, and you're going to see different incarnations of the same heroes. So I think they're getting Tobey Maguire, the Spider-Man from the Sam Raimi trilogy, and then I think Andrew Garfield, that was in there were the two Spider-Man movies. One was okay, and one was almost as bad as Batman and Robin. That last one with Electro. At least Gwen Stacy looked appropriate, and was, it was well acted. There wasn't this Amazing Spider-Man 2 had good moments, but that Electro was terrible. And then they're bringing him back for this next Spider-Man movie, but they said it's going to be a little different. So and then of course the new Spider-Man, is his name Holland, I think. Anyway, he's going to be in. So there'll be 3 Spider-Man characters that look slightly different from different universes, and so that's interesting. And apparently, there's in the new Doctor Strange movie, he's going to be teamed up with a Scarlet Witch, and they're going to meet somehow all of this is going to be torn open, and it could be brilliant because you could have these different this could explain, like I was complaining, in a previous video, that Mary Jane Watson doesn't really look like Mary Jane Watson. The actress is perfectly nice and acceptable and is a great character, just not the character from the book. But there could be an alternate universe, which is what we read in the comic, where she's a redhead. And so, what I would do if I was making the movies, I'd have another Spider-Man that looks like the way John Romita drew him in circa 1966, and I'd have Mary Jane Watson, and I'd have I'd have Betty Brant, and I have Gwen Stacy, all looking like they did in the 60s. I'd have 60s cars, and it would be in the 60s. In that world, it's the world that we know from the comics, and I would show the Avengers and the same actors that are playing the Avengers. And I would show them all in their uniforms, their costumes from the vintage comic books from the Silver Age. I'd show that world does exist. The world you read in the comics exists. It's just the Marvel universe that you've been seeing in these films, slightly different. That's what I would do. And then that would be a great reason why, you had J. Jonah Jameson at the very end of the last Spider-Man movie, right? But he's bald on top, because the actor really is bald. Well, that was lazy. They could have slapped a wig on him just so he had the J. Jonah Jameson flat top that we're used to. But maybe in that world, he's bald on top and he's an Alex Jones internet guy. And in another world, he's got the flat top haircut and he runs a newspaper. So if they have or more than 2 J. Jonah Jamesons, that'll be great. That'll get me past all my objections to them changing things. Just picked this up. I picked up 3 new Mad paperbacks. Well, new to me. These are ones that came out that I like the Sheena looking cover. I never picked these up because the stuff inside is reprinted from the early 70s, and I had those actual Mad magazines, so I thought, why do I want to pay for a reprint in a paperback? But now that it's 30, 40 years later, I realized, well, I'm just going to buy it for the cover, because the cover's so cool, and these were super cheap at half-price books. Will Halloween happen? I see the Halloween decorations. Actually, they're starting to take them out and put Christmas decorations out of the Dollar Tree. But I don't know if Halloween's even going to happen, so that's kind of a weird thing. But I remember when I was 6, and I got chicken pox and I couldn't go trick-or-treating. I'll never remember the Halloween I'll never forget the Halloween that never happened when I was like 6. And that was horrible. And then it came back about 5 years ago. I got shingles, which comes from the fucking chicken pox. And I had been using a laptop, and I had it on my lap, and I thought, well, I started feeling this burning, and I thought, oh, this laptop is like burning me, like there's some radiation or something coming out of it burning me, because it felt like I was, like someone had put a burning sword all the way through my gut. It's like it felt a burning all the way through me. I don't know, I thought it was caused by the computer, but it wasn't. Turned out I went to this emergency clinic, turned out I had shingles. So, horrible thing. So, that horrible childhood chicken pox came back to me as shingles. There's supposed to be a vaccination against it. That might be a good thing to get, because shingles was not fun. Not fun. I was going to do a little quick thing about movies that have been made from Marvel. I can do another one. I got to remember the passcode for my wife's tablet. It's not that. Shit. I'll do another one with DC. This is just going to be Marvel. And this is just Wikipedia, but it's not really telling. It's like got the live action films, and it's got TV shows, and it's got. I want to do it in order every time a Marvel character has appeared in some other media. So they got 1944 Captain America from Republic Pictures. Yeah, that's the first time Captain America was adapted into a movie serial. with like 15 chapters, and it would play every Saturday afternoon with a couple of films. Kids that didn't have television in 1944, so on Saturdays, most of the kids in the neighborhood would go to the local theater and watch, and you'd have to come back for 15 weeks in a row to see every episode, to see what happens to the hero. And every episode lasted about 20 minutes, maybe a little shorter than that, but the length of a Three Stooges comedy. It was a short. And they did a lot of heroes like Flash Gordon, which was done great. I mean, very faithful. But Captain America was not Steve Rogers. The costume looked pretty accurate. It said it didn't have the ears on the side of the head, and he didn't have the shield. I mean, he really wasn't the Captain America that we know. But it was, you know, if you don't really know Captain America in the comics, it was a perfectly acceptable serial. Then they go to Howard the Duck, so that's 86. So I don't want to do that. So actually what we would do from there, let's go to the 60s. And I'll say the next Marvel adaptation was in 1966 when Grant Trey Lawrence Animation Studio out of Canada did the Marvel Superheroes show. And it was meant to be shown 5 days a week. It was in syndication. And you had Captain America, Thor, the Incredible Hulk, Submariner, and Iron Man. And some local stations ran a half-hour block, and some just showed like a single cartoon, like during their clown show or whatever kitty host they had. Oh, you can see one. I'm sure it's still on YouTube. Shrimpenstein out of Los Angeles was this little Frankenstein puppet about this big, and the guy, I can't remember his name now, but the guy that played the Mad Doctor, that was the host of the show. He's a voice you know from a lot of cartoons like Roger Ramjet, and he did a great 60s monster song record where he sang like Bela Lugosi singing I want to bite your hand instead of, you know, to the Beatles tune. I just can't think of his name right now, but anyway, I'm thinking it was something Marshall, Jack Marshall, something like that. No, it's not Jack Marshall. I think it's the guy that wrote the Munsters theme. My mind's getting old, Joe Biden like. So, look up Shrimpenstein. And the reason I mentioned that is during the Shrimpenstein show, they show a Thor cartoon. Anyway, those were the panels were just traced out of the comics, so you actually get to see Jack Kirby art and all these other artists. It's just the problem is they don't really move. Their lips kind of move. It's just like watching a slideshow. You know, hand might move. It's not really animated. But if you can get past that, and you're looking at Silver Age art, and the voices are great. It's like listening to old radio, and the music is great. They have tremendous theme songs, and the background music is pulled from different music libraries where you can buy music, and it's all great adventure music. And I've talked about that before, but the Marvel Superheroes cartoons are great. They've never come out on DVD or in anything, just like occasionally they'll put out they used to put out a VHS cassette with maybe 30 minutes of Hulk, 30 minutes of Thor, but they've never released them all, except in England, and you can't play those unless you have an all regions player. And they keep talking about, I wish Disney would do it. Whenever anyone puts up, for a while there was like 4 hours of Captain America on YouTube, and it got pulled down. And anytime anyone puts that up on YouTube, it gets pulled immediately. So Disney's aware they own it, but they're not releasing it. So that one I give thumbs up to. Marvel Superheroes. Captain America's okay. If you don't really think of it as a Marvel adaptation, it's pretty good. Okay, so it doesn't really list the cartoons. So then you go to the 1967, you had the Fantastic Four cartoon, which I thought was really good, from Hanna-Barbera. Really great, really fun. Still enough of the Johnny Quest people working at Hanna-Barbera that it was really good. And then you had you had the Spider-Man cartoon, also from the Grant Tree Lawrence people that did Marvel Superheroes, except this one was done, I think, for ABC TV, and they had more money, and they actually animated it. And I think the second season, Ralph Bakshi took over. But that show is great, and you know the theme song to that, of course. That one's great. Okay, so then, from there, I can't think of anything else that happened until stuff started appearing on TV. And this is when it was so crushing, because I was like 12. Yeah, 1977. Spider-Man comes on television as a live-action show. It was terrible. It didn't even last very long. The Spider-Man wasn't the Peter Parker. He was Peter Parker, and he was a photographer, and he worked for J. Jonah Jameson, who didn't quite look right, and I think there was a Robbie Robertson type guy. I don't know if he was called that, but he didn't. The supporting cast wasn't there. The villains weren't there. He just fought ordinary bank robbers. It wasn't interesting. The effects, they didn't really try. Over in Japan, they had a Spider-Man show that same year. That was they went all balls out and had him fight monsters and stuff. There was even a villain that looked just like the Thing. So if you could get the Japanese, it wasn't Peter Parker, and so it was some wizard from another planet, some kind of outer space spider that bit him, and Spider-Man had a car, like this weird car and a giant robot. But it was still a better adaptation of Spider-Man and more fun. It felt more like a comic book than the American one. Then there was the Incredible Hulk. They started doing the pilot movies of the Incredible Hulk with Bill Bixby and Lou Ferrigno, and that was that was a fun show. I liked it, but it wasn't the Incredible Hulk. It was just the Hulk appeared at the end, and it was just the bodybuilder, and it was basically the Fugitive, but the Fugitive turns into a monster at the end and throws people around a bar. But he didn't fight monsters. It wasn't it wasn't incredible. It was the okay Hulk, not the Incredible Hulk. They had a Doctor Strange pilot film in 1978 that was pretty well done. It was never made into a series though. Oh, and then they did these damn Captain America. They did a couple of Captain America movies where he wore like a biker helmet. They were terrible. That were around that time. That was meant to be made into a series. Never was. Let's see. Okay, so there's that, and then I think we moved to maybe, was it 84 or 85? Let's see. I've got to go to this other timeline. I think that's when Howard the Duck came out. 86, Howard the Duck. Okay, so Howard the Duck was a comic I loved, and then we heard it was being made into a film. Howard the Duck was kind of like Donald Duck. He was from another universe where ducks were intelligent, kind of like Planet of the Apes. Well, he had a girlfriend that was human, a redhead named, I think, Beverly Switzer. So in this movie, Howard the Duck looks terrible. First of all, he wears pants, but by that time, Howard the Duck had pants in the comic book because Disney sued, and they had to have a storyline where Howard the Duck started wearing pants, so he didn't look so much like Donald Duck. Beverly Switzer, instead of being kind of this kind of weird drifter, is like this young hip new wave musician. I think played by the mom in Back to the Future, who was cute back then. I don't remember her name. And I couldn't get past that. Howard the Duck's suit face just looked so bad. It just didn't it wasn't done right. But there was I haven't seen this since the 80s, but there was a great monster, like from another dimension, like a Lovecraftian monster or something. Maybe it was stop motion animated, probably. That's probably why I loved it. I loved the ending. It just seemed like the very end, it felt like a Marvel comic, but the rest, and that was a big failure from Lucasfilm. Oh, and then there was a Punisher movie in 1989 that it didn't have the uniform, didn't have the skull. I don't. It was some idiot Dolph Lundgren. I don't remember. I didn't ever go. I never saw it. I hear it was terrible. Okay, 1990. There was a Captain America film supposed to be coming out, and I remember finally it came out on VHS. I rented it, and it was terrible. Although it started, in the 40s, and he was fighting the Red Skull. It could have been good, but it was the Captain America was played by J.D. Salinger's son, and he would do things like what was it? He would get in someone's car, hitchhiking, and then act like he had to throw up, and then they'd pull over, and he'd pretend to vomit or something, and then he'd run around and steal the car and it was just like real wimpy, kind of stupid heroics. Um, seems like did seems like they got Billy Mooney, from little kid from Lost in Space. I don't know if he played the president or some general. Just they brought him in because he loved comic books so much. He was such a comic book fan, and he was collecting comics when he was on Lost in Space. And I'm sure he thought, I'm going to be in a Captain America movie, but it was just a piece of shit that was never released in theaters. That was right after Batman came out, the Michael Keaton movie, and they thought, well, we'll make superhero movies, but they have to be good. And then right about that time, 94, 4 years later, Roger Corman had the rights to Fantastic Four, and the time was running out. He only had a few more months that he had the rights to do a Fantastic Four movie, so he rushed one out. It honestly, the cast probably were better cast than any of these other Fantastic Four movies. It just was a movie where it's like nothing but most of the movie they're not the Fantastic Four. It's all leading up to it, and then at a certain point, okay, well then the action starts. But it's like a very very cheap Corman movie. Um, it's very depressing. I mean, I think the Human Torch only turned flamed out for about 20 seconds at the end. Thing looked better than I think that he did in the later movies. And it had Doctor Doom that looked more like Doctor Doom than any of those other pieces of S. Okay, then you come to Blade, which most people aren't even aware is a Marvel movie. Unless you really know Marvel lore, you know he came out of Tomb of Dracula. And the Blade movie was okay, as I recall. It was pretty good. Seems like I'm leaving stuff out. Oh, there was some animated stuff on television, like Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends, and Spider-Woman, and it seems like The Thing, something like George Floyd puts on his amazing ring and turns into the Thing. Thing ring, do your thing. Some stupid. It wasn't what they weren't very good. But there was some Marvel animation going on then that I didn't watch because I couldn't really stand. I mean, I saw little bits of it. Okay, so then we moved to I guess we're moving to X-Men, which everyone was really down. I remember that in the early days of the internet, the first pictures came out on Ain't It Cool News. And that used to be a website I looked at every day, and you'd see, well, the X-Men are all in black leather, and it's like people were really depressed, you know, that this movie was going to be coming out. And then when it finally came out, it really had the spirit of the comics. I really liked the movie. I mean, I was really thrilled with the movie, even though they weren't wearing the uniforms, the costumes, I should say. That was good. Then Blade 2 came out in 2002. X-Men was 2000. Blade 2 was 2002. Yeah, 2000. Blade 2 was great. It was much better than Blade 1. It was great. It was so much fun. And then Spider-Man came out. The Sam Raimi Spider-Man. I thought that was wonderful. That was a high water mark at the time. And people that don't like that, they just didn't grow up at the same time as me. Where I had to live through that TV show in the 70s. This was like the comic book, and it was made by someone that loved the comic book and wasn't ashamed. And could it have been better? Sure. You could nitpick anything, you know, because Spider-Man didn't have all his quips and wisecracks. Okay, maybe, but it was pretty damn good. Yeah. Okay, so then what happens then? The next year Daredevil comes out, and everyone hates that, but I remember I kind of liked it. Yeah, it was stupid at times, but I kind of liked it. Didn't hate that. X2 came out. Oh, that was great. I thought it was even better than the first X-Men movie. I thought, boy, this is great. And at the same time, there was a Hulk movie that came out from Universal, same year, 2003, and that was it did show Hulk, you know, clapping his hands together and flying up into the air, you know, but It was terrible. It was all this psychological art film. Oh, he's the Hulk because he was abused as a young boy, and all this crap. It seems like Hulk, the angrier he got, the bigger he got, and it showed one scene where he's as big as King Kong, and it's like, okay, sorry, I should do that. Okay, so. All right. Hulk. Oh, and the Punisher came out. Yeah, I don't think that was very. I don't think I ever watched it. It didn't look good. Okay, no, that's 2004. Oh, 2004, Spider-Man 2 comes out. That's the one with Doctor Octopus, and like X-Men 2 or X2, I think they called it. They just called it X2. Spider-Man 2 was freaking. It was even better. It followed the some people would say, well, in the Star Wars trilogy, Empire Strikes Back was the best one. The second one and the third one's not as good. They say that's the way it always is in the trilogies. Well, with X-Men and Spider-Man, it seemed like the second one was even better. Of course, then there was going to come the third one, and it did kind of follow that. Although I think it's arguable that Empire Strikes Back and Star Wars, I think they're equally good. Okay, alright. Punisher, Spider-Man 2, Blade Trinity. I heard that was shitty. I don't think I ever watched it. 2005, Elektra. Okay, that came out. I heard it was terrible. Elektra, I never watched it. I'm not going to pay money to see a movie that enough people tell me that I trust that it's bad. I don't want to raise my blood pressure. Fantastic Four came out. That's the one, that had Captain America playing Chris Evans, playing the Human Torch. He did an okay job. Reed Richards wasn't that good. Sue Storm was Jessica Alba. She didn't look right because when you take someone with dark complected and put blonde hair, like dye their hair blonde, it doesn't look right. It just blonde hair doesn't look right on someone with dark skin, and she didn't really look like she would be the sister of Chris Evans. I didn't think it was boring. It wasn't very good. Fantastic Four was the best of the Marvel comics. That should have been the best film, but it wasn't done by Marvel Studios. But Marvel Studios didn't exist then. Okay, so yeah, see, where am I at? Okay, 2006, X-Men: The Last Stand comes out. That was the Brett Ratner movie. That was the shitty one. Although it still had some moments because you still had that great cast. So there were moments, but it was the one that first did the Phoenix thing, and it killed off everybody at the end, it seemed like. Ghost Rider came out that same year, 2006. Ghost Rider was a comic I dearly loved as a child. I have the very first appearance of Ghost Rider that I just picked off the 7-Eleven newsstand. I loved anytime there were skulls on the cover of a comic book. I loved it. So I love Ghost Rider. But I heard the movie was so bad, I think, on all the internet websites, I never went to see it. Spider-Man 3 came out. Spider-Man 3, the problem with that is Sam Raimi was interfered with, and he was told by the higher-ups, Avi Arad, I believe, you need to put Venom in this. And Sam Raimi's an older guy like me that read the Spider-Man comics in the 60s and 70s and really didn't know much about Venom. Yeah, that's the younger people that are really into Venom. And he didn't do Venom justice. The Sandman looked perfect, but then they did this stupid angle at the end where Sandman was really the killer of Uncle Ben. That was awful. And there's this whole as soon as Spider-Man put on the black suit, he wasn't Spider-Man to me. That's one of the reasons I stopped reading Spider-Man, was when the black suit came in. I know that's blasphemy because most of you love that era and that was your childhood, but my childhood was earlier. I like the blue and red costume. Yeah, Spider-Man 3 had problems. They introduced Gwen Stacy in it. She looked great. It wasn't 100% bad. It was not like X-Men: The Last Stand. It was not like Fantastic Four. It's a movie you could put on and watch and not be... It's not as good as the other two, but I'm not. It's still likable in some ways. But okay, 2007, also Fantastic Four: Rise of the Silver Surfer. They used the computer animation to do Silver Surfer. For the time, that looked pretty good, but it's still that same terrible cast, and they tried to go a little further, but then they just were too much of pussies to actually show Galactus. And as an adaptation of the Galactus trilogy, that movie was a piece of shit. So they stopped making Fantastic Four movies after that. Okay, but then 2008, that's when Marvel Studios said, enough of this shit. These other people making our movies, they're fucking them up. Let's form our own studio with the characters we still own. And they'd already sold off Fantastic Four, Spider-Man, the X-Men, and all the characters associated with them. But they still owned enough characters that they could make a viable universe. So they said, we're going to make these movies, we're going to interlock them and have them appear in each other's movies. Like in the comics, and so they did that. And Iron Man came out; it was phenomenal. It was great, and who would have thought? Because Iron Man was never like a huge bestseller. It was never one of the top tier comics. But for the people that just know Marvel comics through the movies, Iron Man's like the guy. You know, how are you going to go on now that Robert Downey Jr. is not with the studio anymore? How are you going to keep making these movies? He's like the most important guy. Well, he wasn't really in the comics, but in fact, in the comics, he was not that interesting a character. He was a very cold, like in the theme song to the '66 Iron Man cartoon. Tony Stark makes you feel he's a cool exec with a heart of steel. He was a very cold, kind of Howard Hughes, not very humorous, cold-hearted guy, and of course Robert Downey Jr. played him as a much more interesting character. It was actually better than the comics, the movies. I hate to say that. The character was that particular character. So that was well loved. They did the Incredible Hulk movie, which is part of the Marvel universe. A lot of people forgot about that. Different guy playing the Hulk in that, but it tied into Iron Man, and they mentioned the super soldier serum, so that ties into upcoming movies, and they have Tony Stark appear in it for a few seconds, and that was I really liked it, but people forget it even exists. Punisher Warzone came out the same year under Marvel Studios, but with Marvel Knights. Marvel Knights was a adult line that Marvel Comics did for a while. It was kind of like the Netflix R-rated TV shows. I remember there was a Punisher comic that came out from Marvel Knights, and the whole story of this Punisher story, you were inside some guy's mouth looking out at the world through his teeth. You were like, basically, you were the tongue of this guy, and the Punisher was pulling out his teeth and torturing him, pulling out the teeth one by one to get him to talk or something. So you were watching this guy being tortured from inside of his mouth. I remember that. This is the kind of sick, twisted shit that Marvel Knights line did. And I never saw this. I think I saw a little bit of this at some friend's house, but it's not. It didn't look like it was, and it was super bloody, but it didn't really look like something that would entertain me. It wasn't close enough to the comics. When I say the comics, not the bloody teeth being pulled out, but the comics. The way I remember the Punisher being in the '70s. Okay, what the fuck? Punisher Warzone. Okay, then 2009 X-Men Origins Wolverine. That movie was terrible. That movie was leaked to the internet before it even came out. Everyone said it was terrible. I never went to see it in the theater. Awful movie. That's where they first introduced Deadpool. It was this guy with his mouth sewn together or something. It's a awful movie, even though it's got Hugh Jackman on it. 2010, and that was not done by Marvel Studios. That was done by 20th Century Fox. Iron Man 2 was really good. That's where Black Widow first appeared. I like that. Thor comes out. I like Thor. Thor was one of my favorite Marvel Comics characters. He didn't speak in quite the Shakespearean way he did in the comic, but it had the Destroyer. He was not a guy that turns from Dr. Don Blake into Thor. He was always Thor. They only have him wearing his helmet for about 10 seconds. I really think that they missed. I think that would have been better if Thor wears his helmet more often in the films. I think he wore it a little bit while he was fighting the Hulk in that arena in the last one, but Thor should have his helmet, you know. It's like Captain America not having his shield in that old movie serial. Okay. But I love Thor. X-Men First Class, oh, I love that. Now, that one was great. That's 20th Century Fox, not Marvel Studios. Great movie. Even though it's not that faithful to the true First Class of X-Men in the comics, it got the spirit of the comic right. If it feels like a comic book, then it's a great comic book movie. You know what? It's a great comic book movie is The Road Warrior, the second Mad Max movie. When I watched that as a kid, I was like thinking, well, this isn't adapted from a comic book, but it feels like a comic book. So to me, that was a comic book movie. Captain America: The First Avenger, also 2011, great movie, tremendous. Uh, they have the Howling Commandos. Nick Fury's not with them because in that Marvel universe, that timeline won't work. In the 60s comic books, Nick Fury was a secret agent tied in with the superheroes who was probably in his 40s or 50s, and when in his 20s, he'd fought in World War II. But when you've got such a stretch from World War II to the 2000s, you can't really make the case that this guy that fought in World War II is still here because he'd be in his 80s. So they changed Nick Fury, but the rest of it just seemed like Captain America wasn't fighting against the Nazis long enough. They had a little montage that showed his kind of the things he did, breaking through windows and everything, but it seems like the way the movie presented it, most of the time he was just being used for the USO to raise money, and then he becomes a hero, and then he dies or gets frozen in ice. But I wish there had been a way to flesh out to show he had a longer career fighting the Nazis in World War II. That seemed to be kind of glossed over, but it's a great movie. I'm not knocking it. Ghost Rider: Spirit of Vengeance. I think that might have been better than the first one, but I never saw it. I heard it wasn't good. The Avengers came out. I love the Avengers. The Amazing Spider-Man from Columbia Pictures. Okay, so they reboot Spider-Man over at Sony with Andrew Garfield. I heard it wasn't going to be good. I liked the first one. You could tell it was heavily edited. They weren't confident in the movie. That's where he fought the lizard. I liked it. Although I thought Tobey Maguire was better. And I wish they had kept going with that. They had one bad movie. That didn't mean that they couldn't do a Spider-Man 4. And, okay, well, there was a bad movie and we get back on track with the next one. But it's all right. Iron Man 3, people hate that. I liked it because these people that hate it never were exposed to the Spider-Man on television or all the shit movies that I had to deal with as a kid. It wasn't that bad. That's where he was like kind of lost. He's with the little kid. And the closing credits, because these movies don't have opening credits. They don't. The credits are always at the end after. It was an amazing opening for a 1960s TV show. It was like almost as cool as the Mission Impossible or Hawaii Five-0 opening from the 60s. It was like it showed all these clips from all the different Iron Man movies and the Avengers, and it's like it had this great 60s kind of action music at the very end of Iron Man 3. I love that. The Wolverine came out, and that was great. That was where he was in Japan. Some people don't like it. That's also 2013. And Thor: The Dark World, which is the second Thor movie, and I mean I enjoyed it. Yeah, it wasn't as good, but it was still Thor, and yeah, that's the one that people don't like as much. And then 2014 Captain America: The Winter Soldier was fucking phenomenal. That was a high water mark. That was great. The Amazing Spider-Man 2. 2014, same year, from Columbia. That was awful. They tried to do the death of Gwen Stacy, and they had what else did they have in that movie? That's the one with Electro, right? The really bad Electro that was like out of Batman and Robin, Schwarzenegger kind of stupid world. Yeah, that was awful. Okay, so that's where am I? Okay, same year, X-Men: Days of Future Past. That was a great movie. That was a great movie. It says it was nominated for an Oscar, huh? Guardians of the Galaxy came out, also great that year. I mean, that was a pretty good year. Captain America: Winter Soldier, X-Men: Days of Future Past, Guardians of the Galaxy. Three great movies. 2014, Spider-Man 2, no, not so good. 2015, Avengers: Age of Ultron. Ant-Man, Fantastic Four. Ant-Man was great. Avengers: Age of Ultron was a step down. Had great moments. It was overall a very enjoyable movie, but there were just a few little moments that were kind of dumb, like, gee, my head sure is hurting because the Avengers were just here, or something at the beginning. There's like this action scene where they're raiding this castle, the headquarters of the bad guys. And some of the bad guys were, after they've been knocked out, were making kind of stupid comments like, gee, my head sure does hurt, or something like, what? Yeah, it could have been better, but it was great. It was great, but it could have been better. Ant-Man, great. Fantastic Four, oh, that's the one where that's their reboot that was so bad that the director's been forgotten. That's the one where the Thing doesn't wear pants. That's the one where I think the villain Killmonger from the Black Panther movie was playing the Human Torch. So I guess they had to explain that he was a stepsister to Susan Storm, step brother rather. I don't know. It's just it looked awful. I never saw it. I think it's on Disney Plus. I don't even know if we have Disney Plus anymore. I think we cut that to save money for a few months. 2016 Deadpool. I never read the Deadpool comic. It was a really good movie. You know, it's yeah. I liked the movie. I thought it was fun. Some friends of mine hated it. Captain America: Civil War. Great movie. X-Men: Apocalypse was had a few moments. I no you know X-Men: Days of Future Past, going back to 2014. This is 2 years later. That scene where Quicksilver uh, sped up in Washington D.C. And it had the Jim Croce song playing, "Time in a Bottle," was one of the greatest moments, showing the joy of being a superhero. It's fun. That was so great. But by the time the second one, well, I don't know how you number these X-Men movies, but Apocalypse had problems. But I didn't have a terrible time at the movies, but I was let down. Doctor Strange, great. Uh, the Ancient One is a woman, and she isn't. Uh, in the comic, was it the monk? The type of monk that the Ancient One was is hated by the Chinese government, so they had to change it and make her Anglo and a woman, because they didn't want the Chinese market, where movie studios make so much money in China. They don't want to piss them off. So, like the remake of Red Dawn, they had Chinese soldiers attacking, and they had to go in and digitally change the uniforms to make them North Korean or something, because you can't piss off that market, because that's where your money's coming from. Because a lot of the Chinese people used to have nothing, and now they've got a little bit of disposable income where they can go to theaters. Yep. Where are we at? X-Men: Apocalypse, Doctor Strange. Yeah, okay, that was Doctor Strange, real good. Logan was real good, although it was a little creepy seeing Patrick Stewart look so old, and it's just, there's something about the just very. I love the movie, but it's kind of like spending the afternoon in a old folks home or something. You know, it's like maybe you're hearing great stories from these old people, but it's still, there's a smell of in the air, and it's like you hear groans coming from the, down the hall, and it just, it was very unnerving and weird. But I love the movie. Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, lots of fun. Spider-Man: Homecoming, that was great. Thor: Ragnarok, I loved that. That was insane, and they tried to get a Kirby feel to it. Black Panther was real good. Avengers Infinity War, tremendous. 2018, Deadpool 2. That was a pretty good year, 2017. 2018, you had Deadpool 2. I like that. Ant-Man and the Wasp. That was great. Venom. I saw about 10 minutes of that at my mother-in-law's house. Venom doesn't interest me, especially when you divorce Venom from the world of Spider-Man. And I guess they're not going to do that anymore. They're going to try to bring them together. But I don't even know who Venom is. Venom appeared during the time right after I stopped buying as many new comics, or almost any new comics, and I still bought old comics. That's when Venom came along, and I don't have like childhood deep fond memories of Venom. I mean, I'd see him on the 90s cartoon. I mean, no offense if you like Venom. I'm sure it's great. 2019 Captain Marvel. A very disappointing movie. It's like the movie where Captain Marvel teaches Nick Fury to be a tough guy. No, that's not. If you go back 20 years from the present day with Nick Fury, he should have been even tougher. I didn't like the actress. She's all over the media being a libtard and insulting people. And the movie wasn't that great, but if that movie had come out in 20, 30 years ago, that would have been amazing. It's a character no one knows who it is, by the way. I mean, no one knows who Captain Marvel is. I mean, old timers think Captain Marvel's that guy in the red suit that says Shazam. And you have to be a comic nerd to even know. And then people like my age think, well, Captain Marvel's that guy. I remember the guy with the planet on his chest and the helmet. It's just gone through too many incarnations, and it's not a comic that ever, to my knowledge, sold well, so no one even knew who that was. But people went to see the movie because it was leading up to Avengers Endgame, which was phenomenal, of course. 2019 Dark Phoenix. I still haven't seen it. I heard it was so bad. I should watch it on HBO or something. Spider-Man Far From Home. That was great. New Mutants. Haven't seen that. Haven't been to a theater. Coming up next year, you got Morbius. I got early Morbius comics. I remember him from when I was a little kid. But you got to have Spider-Man, or it's just not Morbius. I don't know. Black Widow. I don't know if they'll ever release that movie. I'm excited about that. Then Venom, Let There Be Carnage. Is that really what the title's going to be from Columbia? I don't know if I'll even see that. Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings. Okay. I'll go see that. I never really read the Kung Fu comics that came out. There's, what was it, Shang-Chi, Master of Kung Fu, and then there was Iron Fist. And Shang-Chi, isn't he supposed to be the son of Fu Manchu? But they're probably not going to put Fu Manchu in a movie today and upset the Chinese market, because that's a stereotype. But I think they're using the Mandarin in this movie as a villain. And they're saying, oh, that was one of the reasons people hated Iron Man 3, is the Mandarin turned out to not really be the Mandarin. It was just a fraud at the end. But now they're going to establish, yes, there is a real Mandarin. And they've been talking about the Ten Rings since the first Iron Man movie. So that'll tie in with that. So that's interesting. Yeah, Shang-Chi, that'll be fun. Just martial arts in a comic book form isn't as entertaining to me. I'd rather see it in a movie. I liked Iron Fist once he teamed up with Luke Cage with Power Man, though. Eternals, we'll see how that is. I never really read the comic. I picked up a few issues back in the 70s because it was Jack Kirby, but that was Jack Kirby in his decline. I don't know how faithful this movie is going to be to the Eternals. I don't know if it needs to be faithful, because nobody's heard of the Eternals. Normal people, we have, but normal people don't know who the Eternals are. Let's see what I've forgotten. Oh, I forgot, like, Kick-Ass. That was also a Marvel movie. The first one was great. The second one was not. And Kingsman. Kingsman, The Secret Service was tremendous. The second one wasn't as good, but I still liked it. And see, those are Marvel movies that people don't know are Marvel movies, because they're secret, tricky Marvel movies. What else do we have here? See what I've forgotten. Oh, you know, the X-Men actually appear in that Marvel superheroes cartoon from 1966. They can't call them the X-Men. They're called the Agents for Peace or something. And they're in a, I think they're in a Submariner episode. Well, uh, this has been an incredible episode of the Grottu Orloff show. I'm going to do another one later today. But right now, I think I'm going to go see what Nancy Pelosi is up to, what deviltries she is hatching in the Congress. And there's going to be, see what time is it? Donald Trump's going to have a virtual rally probably in about an hour. He's taken over the Rush Limbaugh show. You know, I used to hate Rush Limbaugh. I used to listen to Howard Stern. He'd make fun of Rush Limbaugh, and whenever I heard Rush Limbaugh, he just seemed such a unfun. He was trying to be funny. I have power on loan from God. I am the greatest broadcaster ever, and he wasn't funny. He still isn't funny. But you know, as I've grown older, I realized, I don't hate this guy that much. His humor's not very funny, and I know who hates him are the Pretenders. Chrissie Hynde. He uses her song "Back to Ohio" as his theme song, and you know she's not. There's no way she's a conservative, but that when you hear it now, that's the Rush Limbaugh theme, and so if she ever plays that in concert, it's like, hey, why is she playing the Rush Limbaugh theme? But you know, now he has cancer and he's fighting it, and he's coming on a show and doing it for hours bravely, and I hope he's going to be okay. But whenever he's having his therapy, he's not on. So I think he took this week off because the doctors told him to rest. But when he's on, you can't tell he's sick. And so today he's giving a show over to the president, who, you know, everyone's trying to say, is he crazy? Is he mad? He's on steroids. And then they're like listening to see if he ever coughs. Like, oh, he's coughing. He still has it. You know, like Joe Biden never coughs. I mean, hell. Let me give you a homework assignment. Shrimpenstein. I told you to go look up Shrimpenstein, but also look up J.P. Patches. J.P. Patches was the kiddie show host from Seattle. And I don't know when he started, probably in the 60s, but I know he was there in 75, 76, the year I lived in Tacoma, which is right outside Seattle. And you can see some J.P. Patches episodes. There's probably 4 or 5 hours of them up on YouTube. That's a lot of fun. And he used to run cartoons, but he'd run the Mighty Hercules. Oh, and if I didn't mention it last episode, Johnny Nash, who sang the Mighty Hercules theme, and I Can See Clearly Now. The Rain Is Gone. This reggae guy passed away a few days ago, and so did Eddie Van Halen. And Van Halen was a big part of my junior high and high school. You know, I remember seeing the Van Halen VH carved into my desktop, you know, right next to where they carved in Kiss with the SS bolts, you know. Oh, and then AC/DC and Rush. Those are the bands people would carve into the desk. So, he said he got sick because he had this metal guitar pick, and he'd always keep it in his mouth. The constant smoking, he didn't mention that. But anyway, he's a great talent. But look up J.P. Patches, and he's amazing. Oh, another thing J.P. Patches would do, he'd run Hercules cartoons and stuff, but he'd also take like a feature film, like, hey there, it's Yogi Berra, and it's an 1.5-hour cartoon that played in theaters, and he'd cut it into little 6 or 7 minute segments. So you'd have to watch for several weeks to see the whole movie. He'd show a little bit each day. He was on before school, as I recall. I don't know if he was on after school, too. I think it was just before school. But during his reign in Seattle, he's probably on during different times. Here in this area, in Fort Worth, there was a guy named Icky Twerp, played by Bill Camfield. You can see Icky Twerp on YouTube also, and he would host the Three Stooges and Little Rascals, and he had a show called Slam Bang Theater where he ran cartoons. You can find him on there too. And for those of you that think that Make America Great Again, Trump's slogan means bring back the horrible days pre-Civil War, I think what Donald Trump's saying is bring back the 50s, bring back the good era, the era of America that ended right about the time that Kennedy was shot. That's when our culture started to fall apart. and it had totally fallen apart by about 10, 15 years later. But I grew up, the time I was born in 65, I still saw enough of that greatness from that time period. And a lot of it is the comic books that we love, the golden age and the silver age and into the bronze age, and just right when America's culture starts to fall apart, that's when comics got less interesting. That's when Holiday Inn, I was just thinking about this the other day, had beautiful signs. You know, look them up. Go to my Instagram. I just put some Holiday Inn signs up. Holiday Inn had these beautiful neon signs all down the highway. When you're on a vacation, you'd see them. It was just glorious. There were neon signs everywhere. Now they're just these shitty plastic signs. That's an example. When you say "Make America Great Again," Holiday Inn, bring back your beautiful signs. Yeah, things used to be amazing. But now we have cell phones, and we can walk around and stare at our cell phones all day and not notice that the world around us is quite a bit uglier. Yes, Holiday Inn, bring back your signs. I'm going to go downstairs. But first, but first, but first, brr.